The Pope and Young Club wants to welcome you as we rally together to ensure our bow hunting opportunities for today and tomorrow. You've come to the podcast that believes in preserving, protecting, and promoting the passion for bow hunting. Join us as we strive to be the voice of today's bow hunter. This is the Pope and Young Podcast. All right, everybody, welcome to the Pope and Young Podcast. We are coming to you from a different setting, and I don't have Tim Rzuski with me. I've got the boss man, our ED, Justin Spring. We're at his house here in Montana, trying to chase bears. But we've got Mark Kenyon, wired to hunt, meat eater, with us. Mark, how are you, man?
Great. I appreciate you guys having me on. It's a wild time of year for everyone, it seems like, between bear hunts or fishing trips or school wrapping up. My son's last day of school is today, and then we're hitting the road for our annual migration to Idaho tomorrow morning. So we're racing to get everything finished, packed up, and the house cleaned and all that good stuff. So it's chaos, but good chaos.
Yeah, very cool. So before we jump in, man, give us some background to yourself and what all you do. I mean, the Wired to Hunt podcast, meat eater, kind of everything you got going on.
Well, I will give you the shortest version that I can manage, and then you tell me if I'm missing anything. But yeah, my day job is working for Meat Eater. I host our Whitetail podcast, which, as you mentioned, is the Wired to Hunt podcast. I'm the host of our Whitetail shows. So I've hosted a show called Back 40, another one called Deer Country, one called 1 Week in November, doing a bunch of different films this year and next. And then writing and social and all the different things that Meat Eater does. I'm kind of doing all of those things with a mostly whitetail bent. And then also doing a number of things on the conservation side with writing and various projects. I authored a book called That Wild Country, which is about the history and future of our public lands, and working on similar things now as well for the future. So I do a little bit of everything, but all of it revolves around hunting, fishing, and conservation.
Very cool. I know Justin has some topics he'd like to hit on and questions that he wants to ask you your thoughts on, but I just kind of wanted to start by kind of unwrapping, when you think about Pope and Young, what has been your kind of historical idea of what Pope and Young is, what Pope and Young does? I know you've had some conversations with Justin, so I'm sure that's changed, over the last few months, but in its entirety, what's kind of been your idea about Pope and Young?
Yeah, I think, the original introduction to organizations like Pope and Young or BNC, came from the media world as I was first diving into things more deeply. Probably when I was in college is when I, probably became addicted to all of the hunting videos and all that kind of stuff back in the day. And so that's when you start seeing those scores flash up on the screen, right? Killed a 165 or got my 142 or whatever it was. And so, I was raised on on those net scores and raised on, we used to play a game. Me and my buddies, we would, watch some hunting DVD like Monster Bucks or something. We all sit around, and every time a buck would come on screen that they're going to shoot, we'd all place a bet on what we think that buck would score. And then, we'd all argue over, I don't know, the G2s are this long and there's about this width. Oh, man, but you're not getting this mass right. We'd all kind of, bicker on that. And then they'd show the score after they killed the deer, and we all be, either celebrate or bemoaning how badly we guessed. So, that was my introduction to all that, was kind of the entertainment side of things. And as I've gotten deeper into it, learned more about the scoring system. First, when I started going through at the time was the Quality Deer Management Association Deer Steward Program, and started to learn a little bit more about how they're collecting data on deer. And then later, when I started writing my first book, dove pretty deeply into the history of Boone and Crockett Club, understanding, TR and what those guys did. And that's when I first, kind of stumbled on where many of these measurement systems first, what the impetus was for them, what they stemmed from, what was the, original catalyst for us developing this system. So that's where I got a little bit of a sense of the history. And then, as you mentioned, had some great conversations with Justin and some folks this year too, as I've continued to think about, how the average American looks at the scoring system, and how that translates into how we talk about deer, how we, create media around deer, and how some people value these animals. And so I've spent a lot of time thinking about that in recent years as I've kind of grown as a hunter and been on my own personal trajectory. And then also how, as I've, kind of seen from afar, having the privilege of getting to speak to so many people and hear from so many people, seeing the cultural impact of our scoring system. And that's been something that I've, wrestled with as well.
Now, I think what you said is important as far as, how the general public views the scoring system, because in essence, that's how the general public views Pope and Young, only as the scoring system. And what I find interesting, I don't know if Justin does as well, but your guys that say I don't get involved with Pope and Young, I don't care about score, but then they say, "What's your deer score?" Well, I thought you didn't care about score. Like you still want to be able to put a number on your deer. And so we're upholding the standard of how those deer are measured. But even outside of that, upholding the standard of what's ethical when it comes to bow hunting. And so, but in a large sense, the general public only views Pope and Young as the good old boys club that you get entered when you kill a giant. And so, those are some of the barriers we're trying to, start to break down. But you have the pleasure of working with a lot of different conservation groups, yourself and Meat Eater. What do you think the groups do, and not even just Pope and Young, but the conservation groups as a whole? What do you think? Is there a certain group you think they do it really well? Is there a certain group you think that, they do this well, but hey, they need to work on this? What do you think the general population wants to see out of these conservation groups?
Hmm. That's a great question, and one that, maybe I've not thought about in that exact way before. But I think there's two different angles to this. There's one angle, which is, what does a hunter think a conservation group should do for them? And then I think there's a flip side, which is, what ought a conservation group be doing for their audience? Not because it's what the audience is demanding or what they think they want, but Steve Jobs is always, famous for saying that the customer doesn't know what they want until they actually see it. And sometimes that might be true in this way too, right? Because I don't know, I might say, as a member of the Quality Deer Management Association back in the day, I might have said, well, all I want is more big deer, right? That's what I would have demanded 15 years ago. But a group like that, now the NDA, might have said, well, yeah, more big deer is a great end outcome, but that also means that you want balanced populations, and you want ethical hunting, and you want quality habitat, and there's all these other things that are the foundation to get to some kind of balanced positive outcome for hunters and the resource. And so I think, what a effective conservation groups, in my view, do a couple things. I think that first and foremost, they have to create and engage with an active audience. Like a conservation group, at least most of them, are only as powerful and effective as the the grassroots network that they can activate. Now, this depends on the kind of organization, because there's some organizations that are just focused on lobbying, and there's others that are working with more grassroots. But I think the most effective ones, if their structure allows them to do this, does a little bit of both. They are able to activate and engage with an audience, and that gives them like power in numbers and a voice. And then they are also able to be like a liaison between that grassroots audience and then the decision makers, whether that be the federal government or state fish and game or whatever it is. And so I think if you are, as an organization, want to be able to do both of those things, it requires that you provide value to whatever your constituency is. So that's, educating, that is, giving them the information they need, or providing the opportunities to take action. Whatever it is, you have to demonstrate value. So like I'm on the board for a couple of organizations, and something I've reiterated multiple times is, you have to make it very, very clear to folks out there that you are doing something. Even though there's a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes, the public needs to see it. The public needs to see that real work is getting done, that real progress is being made, that tangible things that impact them or the resource is happening. And I think it's sometimes that's easier said than done for certain groups, because a lot of the work you do is behind the scenes. It's digitally, or it's in phone calls, or it's doing all this great work that doesn't necessarily get thousands of people on the streets. So, in that kind of instance, it's, finding opportunities to still do public facing, forward facing projects or initiatives or actions in which you engage the audience. Cause I think that's a key thing, is the members of a group or anyone who's going to care about a conservation group, they have to feel like they have a part in it. They have to feel like there's a reason to be connected to this group. So let's just say hypothetically, like, Trout Unlimited or something. Trout Unlimited can do a whole bunch of great work, but if they never give members of Trout Unlimited an opportunity to participate and feel like they're doing something too, then that connection is not really going to be as strong as it could. And they will never be able to activate that audience to take action on important things as well as they could. But they do a bunch of grassroots events, or they do a bunch of different things which they allow like TU members to send emails, to place phone calls. They find ways to rally that group. They find ways to give the audience a way to do good work. I was just been doing some work with the National Deer Association on something that I started last year called the Working for Wildlife Tour. And a big thing that I try to do with this series of events, what the series of events is a group, a number of different public land volunteer days across the country that I've been going to, encouraging folks to go out there, join me, volunteer in public lands, improving habitat for wildlife. We've been doing this all over the country. And the idea here is that by getting out there and doing something in person, it leads to many, many ripple effects. It leads to a whole lot more than just whatever you did in that 6 hours that day. You're building a conservation community. You're doing something tangible that builds a sense of agency and autonomy. Like, hey, I actually can make things better. I did it today. I think it snowballs into a lot more. And I think that kind of thing, and that's just like an example, but that kind of thing is, I think, what the best conservation organizations do, all in their own way. Like every different group has got different things. Like they're not necessarily all going to do in-person volunteer days, right? But there's ways of engaging with an audience, activating them, getting them to do something while also feeling like they're making a difference towards whatever this cause is that there's this shared interest in. Um, so that's a whole lot of rambling thoughts. I don't know what direction you want to go with any of that.
No, that's all good stuff. I mean, it's interesting to hear. Obviously, I've been in this line of work for a while, and not as much of the forward facing groups. RMEF, how many millions of acres have they saved? I mean, I always said that, in my previous job as well. It's like, man, what's our tangible that they feel a part of? Yeah, okay, it's a $35 membership, but I had a part of this however many millions of acres, and so that's all good stuff. I guess on the public land side of things, kind of shifted a little bit. I mean, you're talking about writing the book on it and engaging on the public lands. Um, I mean, what's the biggest challenge to those that you feel today? Is it invasive weeds? Is it development? Is it obviously there's the potential sale of public lands and that stuff that rears its ugly head now and again. But what do you really feel like the challenge to public lands and public land hunters really is?
Yeah, well, there's a lot of them. And it seems like there's like a roller coaster of these threats that will come and go. It kind of, I wrote about the fact that in many ways, public lands and our management of them are kind of a political football. So it gets thrown from each different party has different priorities. And so you get this swinging effect where we'll go far one direction and then far the other direction when it comes to, will we be developing and pulling resources off the public lands, or should they be preserved and protected? Will we be threatening to sell them or transfer them, or will we be adding more public lands to the national estate? It's just back and forth, back and forth. I would say that I think we have weathered the worst of the threats as far as the sale and transfer of public lands for a while. We made that, the outdoor recreation community, hunting and fishing and all sorts of other folks, 6, 7, 8 years ago, did a pretty good job of
Oh,
making that basically a political poison pill for someone to start proposing that kind of thing. So that's lost a lot of the energy that it did have there for a while. But I think right now you've got a death by a thousand cuts kind of threat, where you know there's a million different ways that these places can be degraded. This new management regime put in on this specific forest where they're going to pull back restrictions on, let's say, logging, or we're going to put in this mine on this national forest and let it go through, or we're going to have you've got many different pressures from humans on these landscape, and sometimes for good reason, right? These are multi-use landscapes. In many cases, we're managing them for a whole bunch of different stakeholders. But I think that balance is really important, and a long-term view is very important. And our greatest risk is when we get folks that come into power who just want to get the short-term gain, which happens sometimes. And when things swing hard that way, then there's like a lot of alarm bells that I think can go off, where we're going to lose places that are, it's just like trust. It takes years and years and years and years to build up trust, but you can lose it just that fast. And the same thing is true with wild public places. It takes decades to have a special place like the Bob Marshall Wilderness or the Boundary Waters Canoe Area or something like this, right? That's something that is only there because of generations of this place becoming what it is. But one badly placed mine or one whatever new development in the Green River Valley, it can ruin that place, and we can lose the wildlife, and we can lose the hunting and fishing opportunities there, and might lose that entire place for public use well into the future. And that can happen very quickly. That can happen in a 4-year administration if we're not paying attention and fighting hard on it. So I think that is a big thing. And then underlying all of this is that we might be able to keep our public lands public, but we have wildlife that live on these landscapes that are threatened in many ways across all of our public lands. That, heck, I don't know if those public lands are what they are if we don't have sage grouse, or if we don't have mule deer, or if we don't have whatever other species it is. There's a really significant number of wildlife species across the world right now that are struggling in a lot of ways. There's a lot of different pressures. You mentioned some of the reasons, Justin, whether it be development or pollution, invasive species. There's all of these things that are happening that are all compounding on top of each other, making the situation pretty dire for a lot of critters. And so that's kind of another thing that's happening across our public acreage as well.
I mean, that's all, very, very good and interesting stuff. I mean, I've looked at it a lot, and I came from a very multiple use background in terms of timber management and whatnot, and been a public land hunter for a long time. And, I look at a lot of this stuff, and it's, as I'm currently a leader of a conservation organization, pick your fight. Where do you burn your powder? What's the one you go after? And, I don't know as there's a clear answer. I mean, I think it's like you said, there's a lot of different things going on. There's some proposed projects that, might be absolutely detrimental to an area, but at the other time, I think sometimes we're a little bit knee jerk on, the original definition of conservation was prudent use without waste, and so there is a use component, there is a management component, but how do we balance that? And that's why I kind of wanted to start there from you. Those that are involved. I mean, you mentioned a couple wilderness areas that are pretty amazing. I've got to experience both of them, and no, it's nothing you want to lose. But where do we go? How do we decide what areas we highlight? I mean, where is it okay to have an e-bike? Where is it okay to have a motorcycle? Where is your legs the only option? And
Yeah.
I always want to hear from folks, and I guess that's kind of where I'd like to take this is, what's your take? I mean, national forest versus a wilderness area versus, closed. What's your ideal hunt being in the whitetail world? I guess I always assumed the whitetail guys were more that little, private 40 or 80 acre swamp, that they could get to that nobody else could. What as a whitetail person do you want to see in the Bob Marshall?
Uh, well, I mean, I think like personally, what do I personally like?
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, personally, I prefer, or I would like to have a whole lot of different options. So I love the fact that I have some places that I can hunt here, like in Michigan, let's say, where I can have that 40 acres or 60 acres that I can slip in there and get to know very, very well, and hunt a local population of deer that I can get to know well, and observe deer doing deer deer things, and really get to intimately understand their behaviors and their patterns and their trends. I'm fascinated by wildlife behavior. I'm fascinated by that kind of thing that you can go deep with. And so that's a thing that I love. But I also love, and I will say that that's possible in a semi, rural, developed, edge kind of habitat. That's the kind of thing that can happen around homes and some degree of development, and farmland, whatnot. But I also really, really value a wilderness experience like that in the Bob, where those kinds of things. What makes that so unique is our true capital W wilderness areas are one of our last opportunities to have a as close to pristine experience as is possible these days, in which you won't have to see a mechanized vehicle, you won't have to be disturbed by you know electronic lights and all the other crazy things that come with civilization. It's really um it is really encouraging. It fills the cup to know that there are places where you can still go and feel very small and feel alone and feel like you are part of something bigger and wilder than just yourself. And so that value that I think something like the Bob provides, or the Frank Church, or the Boundary Waters, or whatever it is, they provide something that is hard to put into words, because it is not just a tangible value, but it is also an intangible, almost spiritual value for some people. And again, that's something that is very easily lost. It's very easily um, tainted if we're not careful with it. And so when it comes to any of these public land decisions, I've always, felt similarly to you, Justin, in that they're complicated, right? It very rarely is it black and white. Very rarely is it obvious. Well, it should only be this way. And if I ever hear someone who's like, well, it's obvious it has to be this way, well, then I'm pretty quickly gonna realize that you're coming at this from a very biased perspective, and maybe not going to be able to reach any kind of middle ground. But that's what a lot of these situations dictate, is understanding there's a lot of people at this table, and we need to figure out a way to make this work for the public. And like you said, the greatest use for the greatest good. But a key thing in that quote, and I don't have the exact quote right, but a key thing that Pinchot, I believe, was the first person who popularized that line, was it is for the long term. And I think a lot of times there's some folks will come in and say, well, the greatest good here would be that we should maximize our financial return, or whatever it is. Like, that's going to help the most people in this local community, and that's going to help yada, yada, yada. And maybe that's true, but are we making sure that's not a short-term perspective? Let's make sure this is a long-term perspective, because these public lands are not just for you and me here today. They are also for my grandchildren and your grandchildren and those future generations. And I think that's a really, really important thing that's easy to overlook, but should not. And so I would approach all of these conversations with that lens. And I think that helps decisions. And I think that helps, guide my viewpoints, at least when it comes to how we try to balance all of that.
So for the general public, and this is a question that it's really hard to answer, but when you start talking about this type of thing and the general public reads, an article about something going on, it's really, sometimes it's hard to tell what is the right thing to do. Or, I mean, how do we know? So what's your advice for the general public when they read an issue that comes up? How do they even start to determine what is good and bad here? Like, how do I know as a sportsman what's the best decision to make in this situation?
Yeah, that's really hard. You're right. And it's harder even more than it used to be now, because we all live kind of by the way media is funneled down into us now. We all kind of live in these little silos where we are just going to hear the hot takes from our little slice of the world that most adheres to our political philosophy or our interests or whatever it is, right? And so not only do you have that, but you also have a lot of just pure fake stuff these days. A lot of, people can make videos now that show someone saying something that they never showed, and it
Yeah.
sounds just like them and it looks just like them. We live in a wild, bizarre, insane world right now that's going to make it hard for all of us to make sense of anything. But the only the only thing I can do, and the only thing I can think to do in a situation like this, and what I have done in the past, is I never would trust a single source. I would never trust a single Facebook post or Instagram blurb or article on any one website. I want to dig and I want to look at multiple perspectives, and I want to, as much as possible, seek out source information. So, let's say that there's an article on Fox News that I see on my Facebook feed. I'll read that. I'll take in that take, but I'm not going to take that as gospel truth. I want to go and read and what they say about the same thing on the New York Times. And I want to see what's been written about that on CNN or NPR or Breitbart or whatever. I want to get every different perspective on it. I want to go and listen to the original interview. This is something that's really important to me, and I'm really trying to get down and understand, like, I don't know, like the Pebble mine proposed up in Alaska or something. There's something that keeps on popping up, and I keep on hearing about it. I'm trying to understand, why are people so fired up about us, and why are so many folks entrenched on this side and entrenched on that other side. What I would try to do is seek out these different perspectives, actively, not just read the thing that I like, right? Because even though I might have a initial gut feeling on something, even though I might have an initial opinion on what I think should be going on here, I think it's really important to explore all angles and to make sure that even if I'm dead set, like, man, there's no way I could ever change my opinion on this, it's going to help me be a more effective advocate for my thing if I clearly understand what the other perspectives are on the issue, if I clearly understand where they're coming from. And maybe I won't find out anything that changes my opinion, but maybe I will. Maybe I'll realize, hey, this is a little bit more gray than I realized. Or maybe I will come to find out, no, I still feel strongly that we shouldn't be putting this mine in this place. But now I kind of better understand, though, why there are some downsides to it and how this might impact this other community. And maybe we can work on tweaking this here. Maybe when I talk about this, if I take that different community in mind, my communications will be more effective, or this strategy will be more effective, or maybe we can find a win-win. So any kind of thing like this, I'm bringing in a lot of different ideas. I'm trying to look at it from different angles, and that just gets you a well-rounded understanding. And if you have a well-rounded understanding, then you can reach some kind of well-founded decision, and you can feel confident in that, and you can do something with it. But I think, unfortunately, and I've been guilty of this at times too, like, unfortunately, a lot of us hear something or see something once, and then we parrot it as truth moving forward, and we get wrapped up in, like, the momentum of whatever the thing is, and all of a sudden we're yelling at each other, but we're yelling past each other, and we're yelling crazy things at each other, and no one's understanding each other, and we're not getting anything done. And that's a lot of what I think happens in our political world these days, and it doesn't seem to be terribly effective. So
Well,
um
and a good example that we both just lended, Meat Eater lended their voice, Pope and Young lended their voice, was the state of Oklahoma wanting to release deer out of captivity that hadn't showed signs of CWD. And for somebody who just reads the article that Oklahoma put out, they're going to make that article makes you think, oh, that's a brilliant idea. But when you dig into it and you read the articles put out by the NDA and Meat Eater, and you realize, wait a second, yeah, there are some flaws here. And so then you have to wade through the waters of, like, okay, is there any truth? Because I'm not a wildlife biologist. I don't know. Is there any truth to what Oklahoma's saying? Is there any truth to what Meat Eater's saying? And really, it's kind of, comes down to, I gotta read all of this, and I gotta look at what the NDA says. I gotta look at what Oklahoma's saying, and then you realize, okay, well, Oklahoma has absolutely no research driven data to prove that this is going to do any good, much less that it's not going to cause any harm, but it's not going to do any good. It becomes easy to see, but you have to look at all of those different avenues before you make your decision.
Well, and
yeah
the biggest thing on that, Dylan, is, I mean, I think we are going to look at a bunch of sources, and I couldn't agree with you more, Mark. If you looked at my computer search history, especially on wolf topics, man, the first thing I did when I started talking about it was went to the people that could not comprehend the idea of ever killing a wolf. And I wasn't there that they were going to change my mind. I was there like, what is so what are you so passionate about? What is your concern? Let me understand your thought process. So when I start talking to you, I can say, hey, listen, the end of the day, we're in common. I want to see a wolf when I go into the bob. There's no difference here. Okay. And so don't get mad at me that I'm going to take away your goal, your passion. I'm not doing that at all. I'm trying to say let's debate what the best way to ensure that is. What's the best way for the most good to see it, and I mean, at the end of the day, the conservation organizations I've been involved with and whatnot, I think you always have to go to the science. Dylan just pointed out, Oklahoma didn't have, well, Oklahoma's got an amazing fish and game agency, but you got to say, did this come from the agency or was this a politically driven thing? And that's one thing. If we're on this topic, you can't iterate enough is that most states have forestry departments. Most states have wildlife departments that are, second to none. I mean, they know the area, they know it intimately. And a lot of situations we have now politically, they don't get a say. They can't comment on something that's forced down them. And so anytime you're looking at something, you think there's a great idea, always look at that science. Always look at, hey, our data tells us this,
Yeah.
well, man, it sure would be great if we could use, for example, dogs to hunt bears. Well, let's look at our harvest rates. We're at 25% of bear harvest. We're not killing any sows. We've got very, very few, incidentals of a lactating sow. I mean, sometimes I think we got to remember there's not always a better option. And that's what this society today, to me, doesn't always do. I mean, there's been criticisms of the North American model. Okay. Well, where would we be today if we
Right.
hadn't had a hundred funded conservation plan? If we hadn't given, the folks, every citizen ownership in that wildlife. And so, you got to be careful too that there's not a golden bullet. Oh, if we just did this, it'd make everything better. If we just did this. And
Bingo.
Yeah.
I like you said, if you looked at the search history on my computer when they'd be like, "Oh my gosh, this guy's the biggest greedy in the world that would never hunt." It's like, no, no, guys, it's everybody has a valid perspective. We may disagree with it. It may not be founded in facts or science, but that's step one. And anytime I get the chance to say, dig on that, like Dylan said, read numerous sources. You got friends. I mean, it's always dangerous to post on Facebook, but at the same time, man, if somebody's going down a rabbit hole, make sure your voice is respected enough and they know you're not just going to get in an argument and be like, "Hey man, I see what you're saying, but did you think about this?" An example I used was a bear that had been habituated to human food by a campground, and the fishing game had to go in and put down the bear. A friend of mine that's very anti-hunting, very, I mean, as far opposite of our lifestyles could be, had posted it was terrible. And I was like, okay, what's the opportunity here? What can we do? I'll put it in a zoo. Well, what's your thought on a zoo? Do you really want that animal living in captivity that came out of the wild? Like, how do we deal with this? And you got to be very careful. I mean, never get in an argument on Facebook, but a very well thought out, calm, like, hey, just think, I think it makes everybody better, no matter what the argument may be.
Well, and
For
that's what
sure.
you said perfectly, Mark. It's not let's yell at each other and tell each other how wrong they are. Listen, Oklahoma, I want the same thing you want. Let's stop the spread of CWD. But is what you're proposing the best way to do it? Let's talk about some, and do I have an answer? No. If I did, I would be rich. Uh, no, I don't have an answer. But I don't think that your idea is the best idea. So let's discuss and let's have this idea because we both want to stop the spread of CWD. And that's just something that's hard for a lot of people to have, not only in hunting, but in everything. Like, hey, we can agree this is the end goal, but now let's figure out the best way to get there.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think just like the one of the very most important, just like step one realizations is that it's complicated. These things are always complicated. There's always a lot of gray area. And I think if we just enter these types of issues with that understanding, it's a lot better starting point. If you begin with everyone saying, okay, yeah, it's complicated. Now we can discuss.
Yeah. Now, what do you say? Because another question for the people listening, anytime you talk about a topic like this, you get that overwhelming sense of like, but I'm a single person. Like, there's nothing I can do. So, how do you encourage the general public to get involved in stuff like this?
Yeah. Well, I'm reminded frequently. Well, first and foremost, when people start feeling that way, when people start getting that sense of a loss of control, a lack of agency, I think that leads to like a negative, depressing spiral for a lot of us. When we see something that we care about, whether it be opportunities to hunt, or if it's wildlife populations, or healthy wild places, whatever the thing is. If we think that that kind of thing is going by the wayside, we're seeing negative outcomes, right? That's pretty depressing. But there's a line that I love that I've kind of learned to live my life by, which is that the greatest cure for depression is action. And so anytime I'm feeling that kind of way, anytime I feel like, gosh, it's all out of my control, anytime I feel like it's above my head and beyond my reach, I take action. Whatever kind of action you can take, whether it's the tiniest little step, that next right thing you can do immediately will A, make you feel better, and B, point you in the right direction towards continued positive developments. So, yes, not any one single person can fix these problems all by themselves, but all of us, if we do a little bit of something, we can point this ship in a more positive direction. And so I think, there's things like just getting tapped into a larger community so you can be part of something bigger than yourself. That's joining conservation organizations, engaging when they present opportunities to sign petitions or share this message or make a phone call to your representatives. Engage in those kinds of things, of course, because if you are a part of a wave like that, if you can help pass that along to other people, there's this snowball effect where one person becomes 4, becomes 16, becomes hundreds and thousands, and all of a sudden we really are making a difference. So that's one thing. And then I'll echo something I mentioned at the top, which is that finding ways to do more than just like digitally do something, but actually tangibly, physically show up in some kind of way is incredibly empowering. And I think it builds a reservoir of energy. So whether that means showing up to the Capitol in your state for some kind of day, sportsman's day, where we're rallying to make sure that our state legislators are doing something for, for hunting and fishing or for wild places, or if that means going and doing something like I was discussing earlier, like showing up and volunteering on public lands, or maybe volunteering your time to help out at a CWD testing location, or whatever it is, going out there and teaching a new hunter, mentoring a new hunter, any kind of way that you can be actually physically involved in something that's going to help your passion or these causes that we care about. It makes like a difference today in a small, tangible way, which is real. Like you can wrap your head around it. You can see the dirt under your fingernails, or you can see the gas gauge that showed that you drove halfway across the state to do that kind of thing. And that gives you peace of mind, and you're going to sleep really good at night after that. But then it also snowballs, because if you can go today and volunteer on public lands, it's going to make it that much more likely that next week when you see some trash on the side of the road or something, you're going to stop and pick that up, because you're the kind of person who shows up for this kind of stuff. Like when you start showing up physically, when you give a little bit of time and energy for something like this, it says something about you. It's like taking a flag and sticking it in the ground. It says like, I'm the kind of person who shows up and cares enough about this stuff to volunteer or to speak out or whatever it is. And this becomes like a self-fulfilling prophecy, I think. So if you can start in some little way, some volunteer thing in your county, or help clean up a trailhead or whatever it is, it's going to fill your cup, and it could lead to more and more and more good things. Not to mention, it's going to connect you with other people that care about these same things. And, we are the average of the 5 people we spend the most time around. So if you surround yourself with more people that care about these things, with more people that are trying to make a difference, one day you're going to wake up and realize that you're that kind of person too. So those are the kinds of things that I'm trying to do to make sure that I can battle that sense of, depression sometimes when you think about it.
Yeah. No, that's really good, man. So I know you have a busy day ahead of you and you got to get. So what all does Meat Eater got coming up? What do you got coming up that people need to be looking out for and watching for?
Well, I guess the things I would point folks towards would be, number one, this summer I have 5 films that will be released on the Meat Eater YouTube channel. One's going to be about our family deer camp and kind of the idea of deer camps. One's going to be about a mentorship program that we've been running here in Southern Michigan on a property where we've been bringing new hunters out for the last 3 years and teaching them. And we're kind of telling the story of that program and the positive outcomes that have come out of that. a couple films just documenting some wild hunts of mine. So that should be some fun stuff that people can look forward to over on the Meat Eater YouTube channel in the coming months. And the Wired Hunt podcast, every single week we've got new episodes. If you are a diehard deer hunter, I think you'll be interested in what we've got to say. So that would be the first two places that I would suggest people, stay in touch with what we got going on.
Very cool. No, we appreciate your time, man. And you mentioned one series that I want to loop back on just real quick, the Back 40 series. If you are a diehard whitetail hunter, especially if you're a land manager of any sorts, I would highly encourage you to go watch that series. It really opened my eyes a lot because sometimes we get so singular focused on deer. But just like you were talking earlier, there's a lot of things. If I want bigger and better deer, there's a lot of things I have to focus on to get that. And that series was just an incredible series, very well done. And so, if you're the whitetail hunter that is really looking to increase your property, go watch that series because it is a phenomenal series. Mark, thanks so much for coming on, man. We appreciate your time and can't wait to see the new films coming out.
Yeah, thank you guys. And I'll just mention we had a podcast with Justin a month and a half ago or 2 months ago that I thought was just a really great representation of what you guys are doing and a great eye opener, I think, for a lot of folks. I'm sure anyone listening to this already knows what you guys are doing, Justin, but just in case they haven't, they should seek out that Wired Hunt podcast with you, because I thought that was a great learning opportunity for a lot of people. So thank you again for that.
Just out of curiosity, did you get decent feedback on that? Because obviously it's my passion. You heard me on there. It's the scoring thing. I understand. I don't care if the buck scores 170, but why you should. And I'm always curious what your feedback you got from that was. Was it positive? Was it eye opening? Or people still against the idea of it? What would you say on that?
Yeah, no, I think it sparked good conversation. It sparked a lot of discussion around, hey, what have been the ways that most people have seen this stuff in the past? And I think a lot of folks, there's kind of two camps. There's one camp that's just gung ho scoring, and then there's another camp that has been more recently, I think, become a little bit anti that as backlash to that cultural movement we've had the last 15 years. And I think from some of the chats that I've had, there's I think a greater understanding of the value that it can have in that middle ground, which I thought was pretty interesting.
Awesome.
That was actually that was one of your episodes I skipped. I'm like, yeah, skip that.
Yeah,
Just kidding.
see how this guy. He thinks I'm going to take him and find a bear. That's not going to happen.
You might just leave him out there.
Yeah, you need to go to the bottom of that canyon. I guarantee you, one down there looking that stuff.
Yeah,
exactly.
guys, thank you so much for listening. Y'all have a fantastic week.
Yep.